The 60th specials are over. We did the thing.
We
Doctor
are back.
Who is back.
Doctor Who is back. The Giggle's back. We're back. And I'm doing the thing, PJ. I'm doing the thing.
The toy maker is back, sir. The toy maker is back.
You know what I'm doing?
What?
I'm doing the thing where I wear the shirt of the band that I'm going to see.
Oh, yeah.
My merchandise, a big blue box. Merchandise on TeePublic.
Box. Let's go. We have
I actually didn't even think about that. I just got this recently, like a couple days ago. I put it on. I wore it earlier today. I didn't realize it until just this moment. But I'm okay with it. I'm okay with pitching it because I love this show. I love doing this with you. This is a long time coming, and here we are. 60th anniversary specials have finished. We are introduced to Ncuti Gatwa's version of the Doctor, which is coming up soon in a couple weeks. What are we? 2 weeks from now, or 2 weeks from
2 weeks.
Tuesday, whatever it is. Close enough. And wow, what an adventure! What a way to finish it. A lot to unpack.
What a year for Doctor Who!
What a year for Doctor Who!
Again, we talked about it a lot on this channel, just in general. Whether you've listened to us on Two Mediocre White Dudes on Film or on here, the 60th has been like an all-year event for you and I because Big Finish had all their audios that they were doing that all tied together with the D-Generation. We were gearing up for this. There's been comics, there's been books, there's been the colorized version of the Daleks. They have been doing so much Doctor Who stuff this year, and it's been amazing. I love this universe. We've made that abundantly clear. There's a reason we do a Doctor Who show on here, because we love this universe. We love the character. We love everything about this world.
We were doing this without having a Doctor Who podcast. Every other podcast we did, it had Doctor Who seep into it. And so this is pretty much inevitable that we would do this. So.
Correct. It was just a matter of time. But there's a running theme that I am seeing in our friend group, in text messages between you and I, between people I've been following on years for Twitter, who loved the show but fell out of love with it over the last several years. That this year in particular has reminded them why they love the show, and it is starting to rebound for a lot of people, and it's starting to re-engage with a lot of people, and it's starting to just really pull back on all these things that people didn't remember that they missed so much. It has been so fun to love Doctor Who again.
Yeah.
And
the
that's
wonder,
so fun.
Whimsy, the idea of such an open-ended storyline where anything can happen and usually does. We were both of us were very kind of sad a little bit during the 13th Doctor. Again, we love Jodie Whittaker. There's nothing against Jodie Whittaker. We did have some issues with it. The storytelling just didn't feel like, it wasn't even necessarily bad, evil. It just didn't feel like Doctor Who does in a way.
No, it just didn't. There's no way to sugarcoat it, and that's not a dig at Jodie. And honestly, it's more of a dig at Chibnall, but I don't even want to say it to him because he was also very clearly a fan.
Yeah.
But he just wasn't the right voice at the time. The dude clearly loved a lot of classic Who, but he just wasn't the right voice.
It just didn't work. Sometimes you can love a thing and it just you can love something, you can try to be involved with it, and yet maybe sometimes it just doesn't work. And that's what happened to us. It didn't work for us. We still watched all of it. It just became less appointment viewing. We weren't frothing at the bit for the next chapter. It was okay, it's there. Well, cool. I'm still involved. I'm still engaged enough. But this is where it became different. This whole Russell T Davies returning, David Tennant returning, Catherine Tate returning. It did just spark a thing of, wow, this thing has been a part of my life for a long, long time, and it's continuing to be a part of my life. And my God, I just throwing this out there, I wish I lived in the UK sometimes. And the BBC iPlayer, essentially the Disney Plus type layout they have for the Whoniverse on the BBC iPlayer, and God damn, I was jealous. That's what I want to see over here.
Yeah, because for those who don't know what we're talking about, BBC iPlayer is their big audio, or their big BBC player over in Britain for streaming and things like that, and it has an entire subsection that is all Doctor Who related. So it's got the classic series. Yeah, it's called the Whoniverse, and it's got the entire run of the classic series plus the McGann movie. It's got the 2005 through the 2021 era or 2022 era. Then it has from now on, it has all of Sarah Jane, it has all of Torchwood. It has Tales from the TARDIS, which is a newer spinoff. It has the Big Finish audio. Like, it's got a bunch of audios and stuff on it too. It's got a bunch of the episodes put back together in animation that have been lost. Like, it's a fucking sight to behold, dude.
It is its own little TARDIS that I could get lost in myself, honestly. Whereas right now we're left with Disney Plus going, oh, it's just the 3 specials. That's all I got. And we do have the classic Who on Tubi. There's still the new Who 2005 era that's on HBO Max.
HBO Max.
Sorry, Max at this
No,
point.
HBO Max. Fuck you.
That, but yeah, I would love to have it all in one place, and I'm hoping that's eventually going to happen. I guess so when deals are all, contracts run out, whatever it is. I think that hopefully it'll all go to Disney Plus at the end of the day and have everything. Maybe we'll have our own Hooniverse section at that point, potentially. I don't know. We don't know. It's all
I can dream. I still think it's a massive mistake that they didn't spend, that Disney in particular didn't spend enough to get everything in one place, especially in the year of our Lord 2023, where it's like, guys, it shouldn't be this complicated. How's all of Doctor Who in one area?
Well, the only thing I would give, I don't want to give Disney any credit for, but potentially, I mean, the possibility that Max wouldn't let it go yet, and so why
No,
would
but
we
even
get?
classic Who,
But at this
and
point, maybe Disney goes, if we're not going to have new Who, we're not going to have a complete thing anyway. So let's wait until we can get new Who. Then we'll just get everything at that point.
maybe yes, but at the other side of that is they clearly want spinoffs and things, and yet there's a Doctor Who spinoff currently running on
Yeah.
BBC iPlayer that we do not have in America.
Yeah.
And we can only watch the bookends thanks to YouTube. So, that's in my opinion, like, I hear what you're saying, and this is not pushing back necessarily at you, but more just I see where they might think that, but you're also now forcing guys like you and I to pirate things.
100%,
And that sucks
100%.
because I would much rather pay to watch it.
Absolutely. And I wonder if there's any way we're ever going to get the Tales of the TARDIS stuff in there. Again, it might be happen when they get the rights to Classic Who, because obviously Tales of the TARDIS is built around old episodes, so obviously built around classic episodes. So they have to have the rights to the classic episodes. Otherwise, I mean, they could just give us the bookends, but then it almost doesn't make sense. For us, it makes sense because we understand what's going on. But for the the normies, what is this? What are they talking? These little mini-sodes that have nothing to do with anything. But they are somewhat important is not the right word for it, maybe, but they are engaging with the current storytelling.
They're great extensions.
They're great extensions, and they do lock in a little bit, as we discovered with Sylvester McCoy's last episode of Tales of the TARDIS. Sylvester McCoy, as the Seventh Doctor at Ace, had a reunion and kind of had a conversation, which ended up making a lot more sense after watching the Giggle. So it's nice to see that again. Hopefully, we'll get it all in one place eventually.
And I mean, I think the other thing about the Tales from the TARDIS in particular, and I think it was a really smart move because clearly Russell really liked a lot of the ideas and power of the Doctor about how to bring back the classic Doctors with a memory chip.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea that there's a memory TARDIS that allows the characters to regenerate and be not holograms, but those characters, and yet at their age, as if they passed regeneration. And so getting Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy and Peter and Paul McGann, if they could, they obviously didn't yet, but Peter Davison, you have Joe Grant is coming back. You have characters from Sarah Jane. There was a lot happening in 6 episodes of that show.
100%
that are really good.
Mm-hmm. I feel like we didn't get Paul McGann because I still feel like we're going to get a Paul McGann special.
I think there's something still brewing with McGann. I don't think the McGann era is done.
Right. I mean, I don't think we'll get a McGann series, but I think we'll get a special, maybe a mini series
or a series of specials.
Right. Okay, like we just had, like a 3 episode run of some kind potentially. I don't think he's done yet though. But you know what? Let's just start getting into it. Overall thoughts on this before we get down to the nitty gritty of it. There's a lot to unpack, like we said. I think this works as an episode. I think it works as a. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Oh, actually, you first, and then I'll go because I want to say my piece. I have a lot to say right now.
Okay. I think it worked as a singular episode. I think it worked as the capper of a trilogy of episodes. I think it worked the 60th anniversary, and maybe most importantly, it worked as it's probably one of the best examples of a soft reboot in any kind of a show or media or anything like that, because it just works on so many levels of ending the current storyline without a hard end and letting us move forward without the I hate to use the word baggage because that like makes it sound negative, but 60 years we have a lot of baggage, and this just kind of lets Shooty's Gutless character start fresh, new. We are back to like the first Doctor. This is the first Doctor, the idiot in the box who ran away and is out to explore again without the baggage of all the trauma he's dealt with.
So you nailed something, but I want to say, like, and I'm going to preface this out the gate as a spoiler. Like, no surprise, we're going to spoil this entire episode when
Oh
we
yeah,
talk about it.
oh yeah.
But the clear elephant in the room, if you will, of the bio regeneration, I want to say from the ground floor. I said it yesterday on my social media. I'm going to say it again here. On the ground floor of this big swing of an idea within the series, I adored it. I adore
Right.
everything about it. I don't think it hurts anything the way that a lot of people are saying it is. If you feel like it does, like that is a personal thing, and I can't say that you're wrong, but I personally don't see it as a detriment, and I don't see it as a slap in the face or anything else. I think it's a very bold creative swing that is built into a bigger storyline of the last 2 seasons between Flux and this. Now, all of that aside, my also impression of all of this is, "Holy shit, did I love this?" And, "Holy shit, is this not just a great like, to your point, reboot launch?" It is a very fitting finale of 60 years worth of television that I didn't necessarily know that I needed for a character that we didn't necessarily think could get that kind of closure.
There's only so much trauma you can deal with in this show, especially since New Who began. It was based on the trauma. Like we
Of the Time
introduced
War.
to of Christopher Eccleston's entry in the Ninth Doctor. He's coming off the Time War. And like things have happened to 9, 10, 11, 12, even 13, where it's kind of like, how much further can we go exploring the Doctor being a traumatic character and how
It
much it weighs on him? And they've all done it in great ways. Tennant had some great runs about it, and Matt Smith had some great runs. Capaldi had some amazing runs with it. And Whitaker even had some moments in there. It just seems like nowadays it just needed a reset in order to be able to move forward. This was basically like a regeneration of the show. This is what it felt like.
correct.
That literally was a regeneration of the show itself.
While also leaving the door open to go back to that version of the show if needed,
Like a
correct? You
regeneration
know?
of the show. Like
Right.
a regular
And
regeneration of the
so
line.
we have to remember, like, there has been from 8 on. So the 8th Doctor, the War Doctor, the Ninth Doctor, 10, 11, 12, and 13. All the tragedy that those doctors have faced.
Mhm.
Now, 13 had less tragedy in some ways and more in other
And
ways.
others, yeah.
But from 8 on, because when you start to get into the 8's run, he loses so many of his companions along the way. He is the Doctor on the outset of the Time War who wants nothing to do with the Time War. The Doctor who finally gets to a point where someone in his past no longer trusts the Time Lords. Yes, this is like an actual thing. The stuff with Cass is like an audio drama now, where we find out more that there was a past between her and the Doctor that they don't really remember because of the Time War, but they were traveling companions.
Mhm.
And Cass gets to a point where she no longer even trusts Time Lords. And you see it in the day or in the Night of the
Night of the
Doctor,
Doctor.
where she was like, Daleks, Time Lords, who can tell the difference these days?
Right. Right.
The trauma and tragedy that that character has been dragged through since 2005 had to be put to bed.
Right.
But also realizing that there's a way to do it that also allows us to go back if
Allows the
we
lore
have
to
to.
build still.
Right.
That lore is still there. It's not like it's a ground floor. It's just like a reset that the universe is still there. The lore is still there. We can still journey back to that time if Shooty Gatwa's character all of a sudden meets up with an old companion. It's not like he doesn't know her or know him or doesn't like hasn't lived with them. There, that history is still there. It just is a way for him to be able to start fresh and start down creating his own story that's not necessarily reliant on the past. That's the big key. Not reliant on the past. Still could be affected by it, but it's not reliant on it. It gets to create its own
Yeah.
new wave.
Because even Chibnall tried that, I feel like. Also,
Mhm.
like, honestly and ultimately, I think that's what he wanted to do with 13.
I
I
do.
just don't think he really got there, and I think that Flux, had he stayed, would have been the new version of the Doctor's Time War.
Yeah.
But even now, like, even Russell was like, "We need to be done even with the thing I created in the Time War. We need to be able to move on."
Right.
And so to be able to do that and allow the character the growth to move to the next thing is really important, and for the show and for everything, because the Time War, even 10 years ago, was still relevant. The
Yeah.
Time War, even into last year, was still relevant. Like, that stuff was still rearing its head in such a specific way, and now we don't have to worry about that. And I think
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
I agree.
And again, like, we've said it many times. Doctor Who comes in many shapes and sizes, and it can be anything, and it can be nothing, and it can be everything, and that's the beauty of this show. So there's a there's going to be talk for years to come about the bi generation. And I want it noted that you and I, like, here from the beginning, are very cool with it, because there's a lot of good storytelling that comes from this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head, really. I got to say is that something I talked about before we hit record. PG and I are notorious, by the way, for doing like a podcast before our podcast, really, just to ourselves.
Yeah, where we just
That
talk.
we just talk. We just talk about things that we're gonna re-talk about now a little bit. This show is one of the best reasons this show is what it is, especially for me. I think for others as well. This show can be anything you want it to be. There's so
Mhm.
much to unwrap. There's so much timey-wimey, whatever it is. Like there's lines that, like there's a specific line in the show where the toy maker. We're gonna talk about the toy maker, by the way, Neil Patrick Harris. Mwah.
Oh my
Um,
god,
so
so
good,
camp.
so camp, so good. He says something to the effect of making a jigsaw of their life. You can pick and choose whatever canon works for you,
Mhm.
and that's okay because it's so open ended enough that everything can have happened or it did not have happened. So it allows you to be in charge of your own headcanon in a way that other shows can't. Other shows are more strict about things or they try to be strict about. This is not a strict thing. This is open ended. This is a lot of
Yeah,
stuff is glossed over, and that's a good thing. That's because it allows for people to tell stories that aren't necessarily hindered by locked in ideas. You can change ideas left, right, and center. That's why when people say, "Oh, David, hopefully RTD retcons a timeless child," he doesn't need to retcon it. He doesn't need to retcon it. He just
no.
glosses over things, and things work out the way they need to, and he doesn't inhibit his storytelling whatsoever.
And that's the most important thing, because it all this whole conversation stemmed from a tweet that I saw where someone was like, "Do you know how many Big Finish audios were decanonized by the Giggle?" The guy was like, "It was 12 or whatever." And it's like, yeah, but if you watch the episode, and here's a thing that I'm going to be harping on a little bit throughout this episode today that we're doing and talking about and all of this, is that I'm begging people to watch the things that they're talking about and
Yeah.
actually listening to the things that we're talking about, because the episode itself, again, talks about verbatim from the toy maker, "I have made a jigsaw of your history,"
Mhm.
therefore allowing anything and everything to be canon or not canon. Nothing was decanonized because the toy maker is messing with the doctor, and in the
Right.
same way that everything else happens all the time too, things don't necessarily go the way that we think they are with Doctor Who, because timelines are changed always and
All the
forever.
time. All the time.
Like, that is how this show is notorious for going.
Like, I gotta
I mean,
say,
all of season 5.
if you don't like something that's going on in Doctor Who, just wait. It'll change.
Yeah,
It'll change, and it's okay. But like
it'll eventually wrap around and go and be different.
and I say that with all the love in the world. Like it almost sounds like if I heard that somebody saying that who didn't know the show, they'd almost like that's kind of negative. I mean, there's no lasting. I mean, no, there's everything lasts however you want it to last. But you can take a pause and go, kind of like this stuff going on. But at the end of the day, it's going to lead into something you do like again. It's going to bring something back that you do like. And most importantly, it's going to bring back the energy and the love of what at the end of the day is a goofy, campy, sci-fi story that delivers on a fun level, on an energetic level, and on a deep-seated emotional level as well, which is an impressive thing when it comes down to it. This show has made me tear up more than any other show in history, and yet this is also the same show that has like farting aliens in it. Like it's
Uh-huh.
legitimately the gamut of of things. It's even hard to explain unless you watch it and get into it. Because I always have a feeling like introducing people to New Who or Doctor Who in general, like you have to get past some things in the beginning, but once you do, you're locked in for life.
Well, and it's funny you say that because it's a little like Star Trek, right? There is
Mhm.
a lot there's a especially old school Trek when it came to, like, before the remastered versions of the show that they did over the last 20 years, where they tried to update the effects and things like that, something that now Doctor Who is doing with
Mhm.
colorizing the Daleks and recutting some of the episodes and stuff. So we are seeing its version of doing that now so that it can introduce the 60s episodes to a newer audience who may be more appreciative of a newer take on it.
Right.
But in trying to get people into Doctor Who, you're inherently asking people to watch something with a deep history, but also knowing that those earliest versions of itself are gonna look hokey. They're gonna look a little different. It's gonna feel different. And it's the storytelling and the acting involved that really pushes that over the top. And
Right.
yet you have to be accepting to it. And you're
Mhm.
100% right because it's also a show that, especially in the new Who years, when Russell T Davies comes on, there is like farting aliens and there's like weird kind of campy the the Linda group and these like weird ideas that don't necessarily always work,
Right.
but they're tied to bigger stories like school reunion or
Right.
these ideas of other things that happen within the series that are actually tragic and heartbreaking. And there's, it's a really deeply, deeply crazy anything because
Mm.
again, the show can be anything. And you have to be on board with that. And you have to be accepting of that because the show is not always going to be exactly what you want it to be. And that's
Right.
okay because for someone else, that is their favorite episode.
Absolutely. That's a key point there too, because a lot of episodes I've seen people talk about, I'm kinda like, "Oh, I didn't really like that," but I'm glad that you did. I'm glad
Right.
you found
I
something
mean,
in it.
that's a conversation you and I have a lot about movies.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. It just happened to be all in the same this one just happened to be all in the same universe. I gotta say, one of the things that I think Doctor Who struggles with at times is is that weight of 60 years and that weight of expectation and the
Yes.
weight of things. Like, people wanted the 60th anniversary to be something, and when it was a little simpler than they thought it was gonna be, they were kinda like, "Oh, this feels like not a 60th anniversary, this feels like 3 random episodes of David Tennant being back," and it's like, well, yes and no. There's a lot of stuff that happened in the anniversary that made it feel like an anniversary special to me, but at the same
Mhm.
time, Doctor Who was always best when it was a simple story. It didn't collapse under any kind of weight because it just felt like here they are. This is what we do as Doctor Who, and that's the best thing you can do at a 60th anniversary to showcase some of the best stuff of why it's gotten as far as it has. And I think
Mhm.
these 3 episodes did that wonderfully.
Well, and I think that when you look at a show like this in particular, in a universe like this in particular, the freeing itself up in the way that Russell does ultimately at the end of this episode for the new era is exactly as it should be because we are watching another universe that is feeling a little hindered by its own history, and that's Star Wars.
Mm,
Star Wars is currently a IP that doesn't quite know how to get past a specific 60-year period, and they're
mhm,
not really sure where to go. And now we're seeing they're attempting to. We're getting a TV show next year that's set well before the prequels, and we're getting a movie finally set after the sequel trilogy
mhm.
and we are going to start moving into directions we don't necessarily know, but it has taken a long time to get there because there's a lot of storytelling that seems to want to circulate around those 60 years of the original trilogy all the way up to the sequel trilogy.
which is understandable because that's what sold you on Star Wars in the first place to a degree. But it's gotten to the point where I agree. We're going to talk about that on Holy Snokes a bunch. Is that getting outside the box is where it will thrive and regenerate, as it were,
Mhm.
to a degree. And it's not saying we have to leave everything behind. You can still visit that time period. You can still have interesting storylines in there. I'm like, for example, I'm excited about. I can't wait to see the Lando movie they're talking about. I think that could be a lot of fun in that same time
In
realm.
the in the same way that I'm super excited for the Skeleton Crew.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. A lot of good things coming up, but you got to be a little bit okay to jump different places and different times and different energies because like there's a lot more to explore. Um, yeah, but I
I
think the
mean,
big thing
look,
difference is between Doctor Who has a lot more wibbly wobbly room to explore that, where Star Wars has a more harder canon that's hard to go through in a way. Um,
and I do wonder if a part of this now also comes from the is it a British thing more than an American thing? We seem very nostalgic for certain things and very um we're very protective
hmm,
and we very much care about certain things. And I'm not trying like this is going to sound weird, but like even look at Bond, right?
mhm,
Because it took them until Die Another Day to go, you know what? Doing one timeline just isn't working for us.
right,
Like trying to make all these movies one canon is just not working anymore.
right,
And we have to do something about that.
right.
And now I'm not saying Doctor Who's canon wasn't working, but again, 60 years of storytelling is a lot.
A lot
A
of weight.
lot happens in 60 years. A lot of weight is behind that. And in a world where Doctor Who is trying to finally grow and be a more relevance, not the right word, but more mainstream,
Right.
a more mainstream property for people, this is what you have to do. And
I
this
think
is one of those things.
not only do you have to do it, but it's just an ingenious way to do it because
Right.
it doesn't in any way invalidate the 60 years of storytelling we've had at all. It says it's important, it understands its importance, and it doesn't erase it or anything. There's like a reboot that does not like that. I'll tell you the same way. I saw it, and people might think I'm nuts for this, but I don't care. Star Trek 2009.
Mhm.
When J.J. Abrams did that, he did the time travel thing, yada yada, rebooted Kirk. He did that in such a way that it did not invalidate the history of Star Trek. That all Star Trek
Correct.
happened, and then like we went back and rejumped it, but there was still like Prime Spock and everything else. That was still stuff that happened. That I
The
liken to
timeline was still
this
intact.
exactly, and that's why I liken this to that. We have a fresh start with a new doctor, a new companion, new everything, new Sonic. It appears like as we see, new everything, and yet that story is still there. You can go back to that story, and it still leads up to this moment where we have this new breath of fresh air, and it works. And that's something that's difficult to do. I think this pulled it off with great aplomb. Great aplomb.
It does, and I mean, I'm just gonna go ahead and jump in to the back end of the because this is kinda, I think, how tonight's gonna go. There's just gonna be talk about the episode. It just seems like that's where we're at this point.
Yeah,
But, when you see it and you see what it's going for, and this idea that the Doctor has been running for 60 years,
yeah,
60 of our years, but for thousands,
billions.
millions of
Yeah,
his, um, or theirs, or however you want to refer to the Doctor, but the Doctor has been running
yeah.
since the day that the Doctor stole the TARDIS.
Hmm.
The Doctor has never stopped, and I'm gonna say it right now. Yes, we all saw him on Trenzalore. We saw the Doctor on Beryllium. We see the Doctor stop for a blink and you'll miss it 24 years, knowing that they're about to send River Song to her death.
Right,
Yes, the Doctor stopped on Trenzalore for 900 years to fight a war. The
right.
Doctor wasn't resting in those periods. The Doctor was still bound by a duty to try to protect before realizing that that was not what they could do before letting go.
Yep.
The reason that this is so brilliant is that it forces a character who has seen so much trauma over 13 incarnations, 14 incarnations, however many incarnations you want to call it, will now sit and finally have a family again for the first time that has not been killed, that has not been sent back in time, that is not like whatever it is. Like you see the toy maker messing with Donna about even the companions over the last several years who have died in this
Mhm.
series.
Well, that's all
This
right then.
whole That's all right then, which got more and more terrifying as it happened,
It
mind you.
did. It did. That was a
Neil
great
Patrick
performance by
Harris,
Neil
again,
Patrick Harris.
holy fuck, dude.
I loved that line. Those lines that it said every time he said, I was like, "This is this is bone chilling." I loved it so much.
It's incredible, and the toy maker was exactly as scary as I wanted them to be.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It gave the
Um,
Doctor a real true nemesis that like the Master was always the one that kind of did this, but having this character was almost worse than the Master in so many ways because it was almost like Doctor Who's version of Q to a degree,
yes,
really.
it's 100%
Um,
exactly what it is.
except for like where Q, as if you watch Star Trek or not, Q was more um antagonistic to a degree, like verbally antagonistic, where the
Yes.
Toymaker is just more horrifyingly, oh my god, Thanos beyond Earth, he could literally wipe this world, and he's so he's not trying to teach
But
the
all he
Doctor
wants is
anything,
a game.
right? He just wants the game. That's it. That's the rules at this point. But I always felt like Q was trying to teach them something potentially or learn something.
Right.
Toymaker doesn't care about any of that. It's just whatever he wants, whenever he wants it, and that's
Right,
scary.
exactly, which is amazing. Um, but to me, this felt like a bookend of the very first time that anyone ever walked into the TARDIS. This is the bookend of the Doctor finally walks out of the TARDIS for the first time and says, "I'm no longer running. I'm gonna stop here and I'm gonna live."
Mhm.
Because for once, the Doctor is actually gonna force themselves to deal with their trauma because as 15 says, "I am only okay now because you take the time to be." Which is a
Just
thing that people seem to be missing, that they're clearly different incarnations
just this
of the same
once,
person.
everybody lives, as
Just
Christopher
this
Eccleston said.
once, everybody lives. Yeah,
No, and
100%.
hit the nail on the head there. That because I think a lot of times, and you know what, I don't want to decry anybody because like sometimes they watch things and you miss something, or it just doesn't quite hit you the right way until you review it or rewatch it. Sometimes you're just engaged in something else, whatever. Either way, I think people didn't quite understand. It was said specifically in there when he says that line. This by generation does not mean that David Tennant is going to go on forever. David Tennant's going to like whatever you got to say. He still does eventually turn into 15. This
Yes.
15, shooting is when he splits off David Tennant. This is a later version of Shuti Gadawa's character. He is
Mhm.
differently there. He eventually, so that means that basically somewhere down the line, David Tennant will regenerate into Shutigawa, and that's what we're going to see. We're just getting that an earlier. This is a new take on things, which lets again, like I said, comparing it to Christopher Eccleston in a way, we're going to see this new Doctor farther along. We don't get to see his first adventures. These are like this is a Doctor who's been going around for a bit somehow, and we don't need to know about that yet, or we can fill it in later on if we want to or not. We don't get all Christopher Eccleston's adventures. We still don't know everything that happened between the War Doctor and Rose, theoretically.
I mean, and we also don't know now, depending on how you look at Russell T Davies' recent comments, the Ninth Doctor adventures that we've been getting in Big Finish, we all just assumed that they were pre-Rose. What if they're post-Rose in a
Right,
world where the Ninth Doctor continued on?
right, in a way, and we'll get to that. I think that's a big conversation we'll have towards the end of the episode about some of the comments that TV's made. I want to stick to the
Oh,
actual
no, but
show
I'm just
first.
having fun,
I know.
like,
No,
talking about
absolutely.
it. Yeah, yeah.
100%. 100%. I'm just saying that there's going to be a bigger conversation to be had about
Oh,
that towards the end.
yes, 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 yes.
Um, that I don't want to get into quite yet. But no, so I think people miss that a bunch. I think people miss a lot of things because, yeah, and I got to be honest, it definitely was a lot to wrap your head around. Like when you're
Yeah.
watching this, you're like, what the fuck is happening? This is something completely new, something completely we have no idea. I've never seen anything like this before. So sometimes that can be distracting from some of the details that go on in the show. And here's something I do want to bring up. We talked about this a little bit. We were aware of this. This is
You and
something
I.
that you and we were aware. The two of us were aware, and amongst other people, there was a leak about
Yeah.
this happening.
And
Um,
it was a good while ago,
yeah.
like a real good while ago.
And the funniest thing is you said to me, you texted this to me, this leak, whatever, and I was okay, cool. Let's look into it. And you love this by generation. You come out saying after this episode you love it. When
Yeah,
you first heard about it, you hated it.
I did.
Hated
I
it.
hated it. I hated everything about it.
Hated it. And I was a little more open-minded about it, but wasn't a fan. I was still kind of like, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work. I have a feeling that a lot of people who hated it after watching did not see the leak, given time, will come to it the way we did. So I'm
Mhm.
actually, in a way, glad we got the leak because it let us kind of like, I don't know, prepare is not the, you can't really fully prepare for it
No,
because the
no.
leak was not very good. It was just kind of like a bare bones kind of thing.
It was a very, like, close to 2 paragraph as you could breaking down 60 Minutes.
Right. Um, and then seeing it in play made all the difference in the world. And we were warming up to it already, kind of thinking about some possibilities of what it could be and everything else. So I kind of feel like that's something that I almost wonder if RTD or someone inside close to the camp decided to leak it a little early in order to get a little bit of traction in this direction. It's
Yeah.
like, this is going to blow up the fandom. We saw what Timeless Child did. Let's let it out there. Let them cook on it. Let them simmer on it, and then have it show up as we see it, and see maybe that might be a way to ease into it, so to speak. Because that's what it did for me. I eased into it, and I, like you, really, really enjoyed it the other day.
I think too, again, I'll liken this back to Star Wars a little bit. It was like once we got to the prequel trilogy and we knew what Revenge of the Sith was ultimately gonna be as a movie, if you knew that turn was coming, it makes it easier to kinda grapple with the fact that a character that I find quite likable in the prequels is going to turn.
Right. Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's still tragic, but you still know it's coming, but you have a lot of time to come to terms with the story that you're about to watch.
Right.
And so for me, knowing about it, and honestly, we spent a lot of time over the last, I think it was almost 6, 7 months since that initial
Pretty
leak was
close.
out there.
Yeah, pretty close to it.
Um, but we spent 7 months talking about it, I think, before it aired. And part of it for me, and I've seen a lot of people say this, is I did have an era of, didn't we kind of do this before? Like,
Mm,
isn't that kind of what the meta crisis doctor is? Do we really want to retread this? But the meta crisis doctor is actually so different. And
mm,
so, like, it doesn't feel like a repeat to me the way that people are making it out to be. The meta crisis doctor is actually great in its own capacity because the meta crisis doctor is born out of Donna and 10 and is
right.
also its own being in the end and goes off to another universe and is with Rose. And it's an entirely different, yes, it's a clone of 10, but it's a very different reason and being. And what it is so different. And seeing this one play out and knowing what it is and seeing that Shooty is farther down the line and is the doctor and is not a clone doctor, but 14 is the bi regeneration. Like Shooty is the doctor now.
Right. Yeah, 100%.
Shooty
100%.
is Yeah, like, Shooty is the doctor. That's not saying that Tennant is also not a doctor,
Right.
but 15 is now out there
Right.
doing their thing while 15 or while 14 is hanging out over here, really not protecting and not saving and doing the things because now 14 is much more. Now, yes, there's a joke about, like, going and taking someone to Mars and things like that, but 14's entire being now is not to run around the universe doing the things they were doing because it's time to heal
And
so that
15's
they
out there
can
doing it
become
now.
themselves again.
100%. No, and I want to, two things I want to talk about with that in terms of things is that there is a case of if you look into things too much, and that's what we do as a fandom, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, you got to be honest with yourself. Like, this is more about us than it is about them. 15, Shooty is the doctor because he is the current doctor and he is following our timeline. Our timeline of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, Ward 10, 11. That's our timeline of watching the show. When in
Mhm.
theory, when you if you like look back, all the doctors are all over the place all the time, depending on what's going on.
They all coexist together.
They all coexist because they fucking travel through time and space. Like, so example, when the 50th Doctor is traveling around, 1 through 14 are all out there doing stuff potentially. Like, they're always around, even if they've regenerated in our eyes. So it's more about our timeline than their timelines.
And I think at least 3 or 4 of the different versions of the Doctors have been to like Pompeii.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Which means that they're all there at the same time doing different things. Or we know that there's multiple versions of the Orient Express story.
Yep.
Because originally 11's the one with the phone call in a very different version of it, et cetera, et cetera. They all have lived through these things and they're all traveling through time, going to the same places a lot of the time or coexisting together. That is how it and sometimes the streams cross. We've seen it happen.
100%. And I can't remember that second. I had 2 points I was going to make. I forget what it was they were talking about the first part though. 14 settling down. I guess I'll get to it eventually. Maybe I'll get to it. Maybe I won't. But yeah, no, it's definitely a big swing as far as that goes. And I do think, like I said, I could understand why people had a problem coming to terms with it while they watch, because once it starts happening, you're like, you get in your head about, okay, what does this mean? What does this mean? You might miss these little details on screen. But that to say, it's not all about the ending. It's about the journey to get there. Although one last thing I do want to say real quick about what a great feeling to have a different ending than we usually get. For the first time.
This is such a happy ending.
For the first time, we have a happy ending for a Doctor. And also for the first time, we get to see, instead of like how the story has gone, we have a Doctor, usually something traumatic happens because regeneration is born out of something traumatic, gets hit, regenerates, we are introduced to the new Doctor in a quick and dirty way, and that's it. And we move on, and the next time we see the Doctor is a new series, generally speaking.
Right.
This time, we get to see the first adventure of the Doctor during the regeneration. Like, he comes out, and we get to see him in action right away with the previous Doctor. That's new and exciting.
How quickly does Ncuti fall into the role? And like, I've seen a lot of people who have this idea that Tennant still being in this universe somehow undercuts Ncuti. But frankly speaking, I think Ncuti steals this entire episode the moment he appears.
He, at the very least, steps up to David Tennant and holds his own and is exactly what you say. He's got the energy and the feel. When they both come together and they say, I challenge you to a game, I'm the Doctor and I'm the Doctor, they feel like equals. And that's tough to do with David Tennant. That's tough to match David Tennant's energy when it comes to that. Well, David Tennant is our Tom Baker. He is the face of Doctor Who, of the new Who. And
yes, 100%. And we've now seen 2 people in this role, well, technically 3, try to do that with him. Matt Smith, John Hurt, and Ncuti. And not to discount the late, great John Hurt, and not to discount Matt Smith, who I have very much on record as my Doctor, like my favorite version of the character. Dude, Ncuti just is built different. I can't explain what it is. I just know that he is built different, because that moment, man, when they're together, it's magic. From there on, and you see him in the role, there's just this understanding of the role and what it needs to be that this dude just embodies.
And I think my son said it best. We were watching the show, and he said something that I completely agree with and didn't even realize until he said it. This is the first time since, I mean, I watched the classic Who. I watched here and there, but I was never fully on board till New Who, as far as actually being committed to the lore, so to speak. When I watched classic, it was more like, oh, it's on, it's cool, it's sci-fi fun. This is the first time since a regeneration it's not taken me any time at all to like ease into the Doctor, ease into the new Doctor, I should say. When I watched, I started watching really religiously during Matt Smith. I kind of went back before I started watching Matt Smith, I was like, okay, the 50th anniversary is coming up. I'm going to watch this from 2005. And I watched it, season 1. At the end of season 1, Eccleston went into David Tennant. And I was like, fuck, I like Eccleston. I want this new guy. I really liked Eccleston. Now I'm going to miss Eccleston. Fell in love with Tennant. Tennant went to Matt Smith. I don't want to fucking lose Tennant. Tennant's even better than Eccleston for me.
Yeah.
This new young guy, fuck that. Even though he had a great debut, I still was kind of like, it's still not David Tennant. So it took me a little bit to win him over. When Smith took a little time to win over. I'm on record saying Peter Capaldi is my favorite Doctor, I think, at this point. And I've really grown. He's kind of been a slow burn. Like, even, I don't think Capaldi was my favorite during his run.
Like, no. I remember talking to you. Tennant was always your dude until it's in the last year, to be honest.
Yeah, it's in the last year or two. I've rewatched it again. That I really felt like Capaldi. I think if you haven't rewatched Capaldi's era out there, I really think you should dive deep in there, because even though the writing is a little hit or miss, he's just got an understanding of the character that I think deserves a second watch and a second viewing of it. But again, he took a long time until like a 7th or 8th episode before I was like, okay, now it's the Doctor. I have no reservations of saying, Shooty got stepped out of David Tennant's body. That's the Doctor.
Yeah,
that's the Doctor.
I think there is something to be said about the fact that we do get 15 minutes of time with him in the role. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. Again, this is a big portion of it, but the argument was already there when they did the rebroadcast of An Adventure in Time, Space and Time, because the little part where they put Shooty in over Matt instead went over like gangbusters for a lot of people who went, the charisma on that man already. Look at him. He's incredible.
Yep.
And then you cut to the trailers and the what the hell is going on here was like memed and became a thing. And people were already obsessed with Shooty in the role. And now we know that all of that was a man in his underpants. Like, let's make that out there. That was a man in his goddamn underpants.
Which I couldn't help but thinking is, so David Tennant is the 14 going commando now? Is that what's basically going on? Is that because they basically have the close regenerate split off as well? And another point I wanted to make about you mentioned how people are kind of afraid of David Tennant undercutting Shooty now that he's there for a while. I think as long as you don't have a David Tennant, David Tennant, Catherine Tate series going on at the same time, it won't undercut. I think it'd be wrong to have David Tennant and Catherine Tate have a series about them right now, a spin-off series. Even though I was one who kind of proposed, like, well, we're making a Hooniverse, we're making a multiverse, we could have a bunch of different things going on at the same time. I think that could undercut Shooty, because it's like, well, it's almost like
saying, then it's a second Doctor Who show.
We don't believe in Shooty. We want the real, quote unquote, real Doctor to have his own show still, kind of backing it up. And exactly, it's a second Doctor Who thing. Now, does that mean we can't get like another series of specials later on? I think that'd be fine. I think the Paul McGann having specials would be fine. I think having David Tennant pop in a unit spinoff, if that were to happen, would be fine. And I think it won't undercut Shooty, because Shooty is, again, in our timeline, the current Doctor.
And I wouldn't be surprised if we learn down the line that there's more to this by a generation, obviously, because Russell has teased it already that apparently 14 is going to have much different final words than Alonzi.
Right.
So that means that there is a plan there. And I think that that's the other thing that I think people are missing. I do think we are eventually going to get to a point where we will see the regeneration. We will see more of what caused all this. And I mean, it was Wild Blue Yonder that caused all this. Yes. That's the importance of that episode, is that the Doctor introduces myth and superstition at the edge of a universe that they don't understand anymore. Because when you look at allowed the Toymaker in that. And we have to remember, like, again, this is a post-Flux universe. A universe where everything was destroyed and rebuilt in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
And places and things and events are all different. And now this version of the Toymaker also was out there and allowed back in. Right. And now that Toymaker is messing with reality and changing history. And it's not going to be as easy as, oh, hey, 14 is going, like, I'm so happy. Again, don't get me wrong. There's something to be said about a happy ending, and I will get to that. However, that is not also saying that 14 is also not going to eventually have to face the consequences of that.
Right. 100%. 100%. He might have some adventures left in him as well. I will say also that's a very key point you mentioned. The toy maker or introducing myth with at the end of the universe, letting the toy maker back in. I think a lot of people kind of missed the point of that.
Yeah.
Being like by generation, specifically, Shooty said it, it was a myth. By generation never actually happened because it was a myth in the Time Lord lore. Because the
Yeah.
toy maker was there, that allowed that myth to come to life. This is a
Because the Doctor
one-time thing,
reintroduced
people.
in myth. Right.
This is a one-time thing, people. Some people are like, "Oh, this is changes everything." When Ncuti Gatwa regenerates into the 16th Doctor, 3, 4, 5, whatever years from now, seasons from now, I think we're going to get a typical Doctor Who regeneration because
Yeah.
that's how it is. But so this is just like a one-time kind of craziness that let Doctor Who kind of like regenerate itself and do different things with it, including the bi-generation. So I would say again, I don't want the bi-generation to be a thing. If it happened all the time, I think that'd be kind of a pointless way to do things all the time. But for
Yeah.
how it works out here and what it does here, I think it's a nice little piece of storytelling.
And again, because I think it offers the Doctor so much of a happy ending that the character never got before. I
Right.
think that there is an entire generation of fans who have this idea that storytelling needs to end in tragedy for
Yeah.
their characters to be able to be put to bed.
Right.
I'm not sure exactly where it starts. I kind of feel like the death of Superman is the beginning of that. And you
Mm,
see it, it's a running thing through a lot of things. The death of Superman, Logan, you look at
mhm.
the death of Spider-Man, you look at the death of Captain America, you look at a lot of this stuff, right? A
Yep.
lot of the storytelling is built around tragedy. And yet, I find that some of my favorite versions of these legacy sequels are the ones that we've gotten over the last couple of years. And I'll say it right now, in this last year,
Mm.
Picard season 3,
Yes.
this, and Dial of Destiny all offer much more poignant, beautiful endings for characters that puts them to bed without forcing them to die in honor to keep their name or something like that. There's
Right.
something to be said about our characters riding off into the sunset in some way, but
Right.
also having one last grand adventure.
Yeah, it's an open-ended finale, but that's
Mhm.
not necessarily a bad thing because, quite frankly, I think Peter Capaldi said it best in an interview. I feel like my doctor is out there bouncing around, bound space. It's sort of bouncing around time and space and everything else. And to me, that's the greatest thing about Doctor Who. That there doesn't have to be an ending, a real ending to things. It's open ended enough. Like, I mean, the capital E ending. There's the open endedness to it, which leads you to believe there's always something going on. Life is always happening. There's always that kind of comfort that our favorite
Yes.
character is still out there enjoying life, having good moments, and everything else. And whether or not we ever see them again or not, we don't have to see them again. It's kind of cool when we do, sure, if we can. But like otherwise, it's okay to end on that way, end in the happy segment of someone's life. That's a good thing. It's a good thing. We need a little more
Well,
positivity in our life, to be honest with you.
we do, and I think, frankly speaking, something that Davies has clearly come to terms with is that he also fell victim to characters needing tragic endings.
Mm.
And there's
John and
something, or
Noble.
even
That's
right, or
that's what I'm trying
bittersweet
to. Yeah.
endings of Rose getting her own doctor who is not the doctor,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah.
So there's something to be said about that, him growing and realizing that you can't always have it that way, but also that sometimes only you can heal yourself, which is why the moment when Shooty's doctor hugs Tenants and is like, "It's okay. Like, I'm here for you. I've got you." That's an
Mhm.
incredible moment because it's also about self-healing. Like, there's something very deep about the doctor finally being the one. Like, he's not relying on anyone but himself to heal him for the first time.
Only you can truly forgive yourself and help yourself move on. Yeah, you have support of your friends, of your loved ones, etc. That's not to
Yes.
denigrate that in any way, shape, or form. But at the end of the day, you have to be willing to heal yourself in a way, to forgive yourself. And quite frankly, who else could possibly understand everything the doctor has been through? None of his companions can fully understand. They can grasp the outside edges of it, maybe, but who can fully understand except for another incarnation of the doctor? So, in a way, that's the beautiful thing. It takes a doctor to say, I have you. You're going to be okay. Look, I'm you in the future. You're going to be okay
Yeah.
because you take the time to do it, because you take the time to rehab. And I got to tell you, one thing about the thing, I watched the teaser for the Christmas special, and the fact it opens with him in like this club, freely
Yeah.
abandoning, like dancing, it felt so happy. And he feels so happy. That's not a doctor we've gotten in a while. I mean, let's face it, Matt Smith was energetic, but there was a darkness to him. Peter Capaldi
Mhm.
was definitively a grumpy old man, like in the best way possible. He
Yeah,
still loved,
100%.
energetic, but you could feel he had the weight there. I think they tried to do it with Jodie a little bit, but Jodie came across more just a doctor in denial than
Mhm.
someone who is truly happy. This just feels like Shooty's like, I am in love with myself again, and not like in an arrogant way, but I'm in love with the idea that I get to go bounce around time and space, have adventures, and enjoy what that
Well,
possibility brings.
100%, and it was said in his first line, right? Because there's that moment when Tennant and him are staring at each other during the bi-generation, and Tennant goes, "Wait, you're me?" And he goes, "No, mate, I'm me."
I'm me. Yeah,
Like,
I'm me now.
15 knows that who 14 is not who 15 is. And
Right,
I love that because that's the other thing. This show has really conditioned us to really have to come to terms with a lot of the time we need to remember, yes, they're all one character, but
right.
that doesn't make them the same. And I
No.
loved that Shooty refused
Mhm.
to be seen as him. And I
Right.
even love that, like, at one point, he even calls him kid and
Yeah.
tells him, "I love you. Get out of my TARDIS."
Yeah.
Like, he this is a doctor who is not one to be messed with because he loves himself, he loves who he is, he loves his life, he loves what he's become. And I think that there's something really sweet about that in the same way that I think there's something very sweet about the version of Tennant's doctor finally taking the time after all this time to rehab. Because this goes back to the first special. Donna asking, why did this face come back just to say goodbye? This
Right.
face didn't come back just to say goodbye. This
Nope.
face came back to finally revisit its family and live with it and finally come to terms with the pain and the trauma of the last 1,000 years of his life.
Not only that, like you said, it's funny you did talk about how different they are, and I want to talk about how the same they are as well, because both are actually true in any way,
Yeah,
shape, or form.
100%.
David Tennant's like last line in this is, "I've never been happier in my life," and that's what Shooty is at that point. He's never been happier in his life. Of course, it's a generation has happened, a regeneration has happened somewhere along that line. But that's where David Tennant got to after the rehab. I've never been happier in my life. And now Shooty is out there living that happy life. But more importantly
Yeah,
to me, and again, saying that the 60 years is not erased completely, Shooty understands because Shooty and Tennant had that moment where he had to convince the doctor to the rehab because he remembers everything. Sarah Jane being gone. I
oh
loved
my god.
Rose.
Dude,
I loved
when
all the
he
things
brings
he
up
mentions.
Adric,
Adric,
oh my god.
Legopolis, like all this stuff
Dude,
going
the
through.
name dropping, the key to time, the
The
trial,
time,
when they're oh my god.
Gods
Like,
of
are you
Ragnarok,
kidding me?
right? Everything that they went through together. It's still there. Shooty remembers it, but because you did the rehab, you can live with it instead of living against it. And I want to point out real quickly, I really think the Gods of Ragnarok were specifically chosen
Oh,
by
a
Davies.
100 I don't think that was the only one.
I don't think so either,
I
but
think that
specifically that.
the key to time, and I think the trial of the Time Lord was
Might
all
all come back
very
into play.
specific.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
true.
remember, Trial of the Time Lord was the first time we ever really came to, like, face to face with the evil doctor. That was the Valyard.
The Valyard. I think the Valyard's finally like that. Valyard has been one of those things between the Valyard and
The Ronnie.
maybe Ronnie, the Ronnie or the Chew, ever since Doctor Who came back in 2005. People have been kind of
Mhm.
clamoring for or wondering when they were going to happen or were they going to happen. And I think RTD knows that very well. And I think we're finally going to get a piece of that. I think we get the Valiard because of the bi generation. I think that actually is going to be part of the bi generation, I think.
I agree 100%.
And I don't know. Is the Ronnie involved with the Master potentially? Because we don't know who
I
picked up that gold
the
tooth.
tooth.
We don't
I
know who
I
picked it up.
I kind of think we're finally getting the Ronnie. I think Davies would be crazy not to finally do it.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely.
and it feels like we finally reached that moment where it's kind of time.
Yeah. I agreed. And a celebration of the past and bringing it forward to the future. I think it's a good way to do it. And it's honestly a way that like it helps because there's always a risk when you do any kind of reboot, no matter what it is, no matter how small, and no matter how well done. Like I kind of kept saying, there is that risk of alienating the fans from 60 years who've been there the whole time. Like you're like basically, oh, so my 60 years hasn't been important, kind of thing. This is the way
Yeah.
you have it start with Judy doing a whole new thing, but then you bring in some of the stuff like the Villiers, the Ronnie, and it kind of like just acknowledges that, acknowledges the weight and the history and the fandom that's been there forever as well. So I wouldn't
But
be surprised
also
if I do
being
it.
able to leave it behind,
Yeah.
right? Because now you get a new take on the Valiant. A
Right.
Valiant that the history is there, but now we get to do something new and different. In the same way with the Ronnie, like even the Daleks, man. Like there's so much baggage just with the Daleks in the last 5 years. Like
Hmm.
there's a lot to be said about what happened at the end of Clara's very first episode. The one
Uh-huh.
that we didn't know she was in
Yeah. Yeah.
into what it became. And so there's a lot happening here. And I love that the show now has this kind of fresh goggles look. And I gotta say, something I didn't catch until this moment as much. Again, talk about a show that or watching something so intently that you miss things too. The show also tells you that for the first time, this episode and this thing was not about the doctor saving the people around him. For the first time, this was about the people around him saving him.
Right.
Because Donna even says, when he says that line, "I don't know if I can save you this time." She goes,
Maybe I'll
"But
save
it's
you.
not about," but first she says, "It's not about you." And he goes, "Well, yes, it actually is." And she goes, "Well, then fine. Maybe this time I save you."
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful moment. It's a beautiful moment. Um, wow. So still so much to unpack, but let's like talk about Neil Patrick Harris and everything he did in this. Eh, David,
There's going to
I'm
be a lot of
watching. Go ahead.
uh a lot of opinion about
I think so too.
this toy maker. I do. I think there's going to be a lot of opinion about the performance and the portrayal and
Neil
the
Patrick
writing of this
Harris is a
character.
very, I'm not even saying polarizing individual because I don't even think it's a polarizing thing, but it sometimes is hard to get past the NPH of it all. He has
Correct.
such a vibrant personality that it's hard to kind of let him fall back into a character. I think Ryan Reynolds is actually the same kind of way. You always see Ryan
Mhm.
Reynolds, you always see Bruce Willis from back in the day. You
Well, it's
see,
why, to your point, right? Ryan Reynolds, you have to put him in a mask
yeah,
just to
uh,
make him disappear into a thing, right?
right. And I think the same is true, and it's not necessarily a bad thing because he is well beloved and he is very good and very entertaining. But it can be a challenge, I guess, is the best way to say it. If I think there's people out there who probably didn't like his toy maker because it was very NPH, um, but I'm not one of those people. I think this actually worked very well because NPH was a very. I think he fit the character very well. The character felt like a godlike creation or a godlike being who was playing with them. He felt in control of the situation. He felt horrifying, like you said, like the kind of things. Like he had moments where he wasn't, but those moments when he chose to be, then it was
Yeah.
terrifying.
Well,
And
there
I
was
still go back.
moments too where he started to break, right?
Right.
Because he's kind of fucking with everyone. Like
Yeah.
that's the nicest way to say it. The toy maker spends a lot of time messing with everyone around him, but there's moments where the charade of this kind of campy sideshow individual goes away, and you
Right.
start to see the breaking point of a dude who's actually really deranged, who is hindered by rules. It's all he knows, and yet he's been unleashed in a universe that only plays by rules, and now that is his domain.
Right. Um, and it's kind of a weird thing. Like, it's hard to portray a godlike creature and have it come off because, NPH, but as some people might like, he's not a god himself. He's a human being playing a godlike character.
You say that, but have you seen that man? I don't think he's aged since Doogie Howser.
That's true. That's actually true. But he has those moments. One of my favorite moments is when the doctor starts on the unit on the Avengers Tower, as we call it, Avengers Tower. He comes
Yeah,
out and starts talking to him, and he has a line. I'm actually on it now where Neil Patrick Harris stops being the game maker or the toy maker, the gamester, and says, "You know full well this is a face. This is basically just a mask
yeah.
of this entity, of this vastness that you can't possibly comprehend."
Well, and to be frank, like there's a scene in this that I think is going to get a lot of weird flack and or get a weird cult following, and there's not a lot of in between, and that's the scene with the Spice Girls where the toy maker is going through unit and he's basically lip syncing the Spice Girls, and it's kind of done with comic effect, and yet it's actually
Terrifying.
really fucking terrifying because while it's all happening, he's killing all of them. Like,
Yes.
there's no way to say it. He's actually murdering all those people, and they're not able to stop him. And it's scary. Like, that it's a great sequence in a lot of ways. It's flashy. It plays to Neil Patrick Harris's strengths. It plays to Russell T. Davies' strengths. But the thing that it does the most is it leaves you unnerved. You're both laughing and horrified by what's happening.
In so many different ways. Like I think that's what makes it so effective is that sometimes
Right.
humor can mask tragedy, and that's exactly what happens there. Um, I will say I don't know what's a nitpick of the show for me, but it's a little minor nitpick I had, and maybe you'll call me out and let me know why I'm wrong. I just find you do sometimes. It
I
was
try
a
not
little,
to.
I felt like it was a little bit derivative of the Rasputin thing for Power of the Doctor. He kind of had
I
the
don't
same.
I don't disagree with you, but I think with the difference with the Rasputin one is that is the master trying to show how powerful he thinks he is. And even the Cybermen and the Daleks are like, "What the fuck is happening?" Because it has that moment where the two like turn and stare at each other, and they're
Mhm,
like, "We didn't sign up for this." Whereas in this one, it's also used to so all of Unit sees who he is. Because remember, the Doctor doesn't know how to explain who the toy maker is to them.
right.
And
And
that scene even ends with him going, "If I told you that he could change things with the power of his thoughts, would you believe me? Like, would that be enough?" And she goes, "Sure. Is
can
that
he
what it
do
is?" And
that?
he goes, "No."
Nope. Nope. Yeah,
But it's
just
the
flat
only
out.
way to do it. So there is a truth to it feeling like that. But I mean, look, even before that, the master has his whole like dance sequence with his wife during the
Right.
season 3 finale
Yeah,
in the
that's true.
same way that, you know, Davies has always kind of done this, even with Toxic being such a big part of literally the second episode of this series.
Right. I agree. Yeah. So, y yeah, I was wanna say bringing it back, I'm not saying this ruined it for me at all.
No, no, no.
It
I
hasn't
know you're
ruined
not.
it.
You said that I'd probably push back a little bit, and you were 100% right.
So did you. And at the end of the day, I don't disagree with anything you said because at the end of the day, it definitely didn't turn I just remember watching and going, feel like we just saw this type of thing with whatever. But it worked anyway because it's Neil Patrick Harris, it's Spice Girls, and it was still again, it was basically the terrifying aspect of it during the thing that really kind of sold me on it. But yeah, God,
Well,
oh, it's
that's as it should be, right?
right,
Like it
right,
that if you can buy into it because of that, at that point, it's done its job. You
right,
need to be how we were, where you're both
right.
like, this is so entertainingly campy because it should be, because Doctor Who is at its best when there's an air of camp. It
Yes,
just is
preach.
100%. Yes. Like People want Doctor Who always to be serious, and I think that was one of the things that ultimately undercut both Chibnall and Moffat. As much as I like the two of them, I don't think that they ever leaned on the camp nearly as much as they could and or should have. There's
100%.
a little bit of season 5 that does, but I think that after season 5, Moffat kinda jettisons most of it, like, some of it in season 6 too, but again, it's usually the first half, and it doesn't seem to land after that.
Mm.
But when you look at this one, you have that camp, and it makes it work, and with that little bit of camp, you're like, "Man, this is really funny, this is really entertaining," and yet you're also horrified knowing he's murdering all these people.
Yes. That's the best part, like, because David Tennant sells it also.
Right.
It was the, "No, no, no, don't. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Kate. They're dead. I'm sorry." Like, this is not like a
Yeah.
like, but because it's like, funny thing is because in many Doctor Who episodes, there'd be a case where there'd be something similar happening, but the people wouldn't have died, perhaps. They would have been sent away, the doctor would save them or whatever. No, 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 no. In this case, they're dead. Like, how often do you say that? Doctor, like, so quickly, just like, "No, they're dead. I'm sorry." It's like,
Yeah.
damn, damn. Good stuff, though.
It's really heartbreaking, and, real quick too, to bring that full circle to a moment earlier in the episode, but there's been a lot of talk about why did the toy maker not bring up any of 13's companions when he's trying to spook Donna about the different people in the Doctor's lives who have tragically disappeared, and that's exactly the thing. All those people tragically died that the toy
Mhm.
maker is talking about. 13 doesn't have any dead companions.
No,
Don't
no,
13
and
only had the Flux.
yeah, and in some ways that's worse to a degree, and in
No,
some ways that's worse
exactly.
because there's a lot more going on in the flux as far as that goes. But you're right; they're not going to bring up the dead companion. And not only that, by the way, first of all, I think I wish I could credit this person. I saw this on social media, somebody defending, which is funny. Like, as far as we know, he just left Yaz like 3 days ago. So it's
Right,
not even like a thing yet where they're like, she just saw it 3 days ago. We're good there. That's no traumatic to them at this point.
right.
It's a
But
funny
it's
thing.
just so funny because, like, people have been real up in arms about, "Oh, why wasn't Yaz brought up or any of them?" And it's like, well, because they're all still alive. We saw
Yeah.
them. They were all at a literally 3 days ago, they were all at a companion focus group type, you know, uh,
Support group, whatever it is. Yeah.
companion
Which I
support
love.
anonymous thing. Yeah,
Right.
like, and I love that. Again, love that. It's a great moment. It's a great bit, but that's where they were, right? So,
Mhm.
it's just one of those things. And I love that this episode had the balls to go so campy. And I'm going to say it about all three of these episodes. The one thing I was so happy about over the last 3 weeks watching this show again, and I just got to the Dr. Bean super watching Neil Patrick Harris doing the lip sync again, and it's everything that you want it to be and more. Um, but I love how Davies didn't hold back who he is when he runs Doctor Who. And he does have this tendency to let the camp lead a lot of the time. And it's okay because the storytelling is always so good that you can get past it and you can look past a lot of the shortcomings in the storytelling, or in this case, the editing. This
Right.
episode is a little too short. I haven't said anything about it yet because, frankly speaking, it could have been about 15 more minutes.
I
I
agree.
think
This
we
is
can use more information and a little more. And according to the leak, there was a little bit more.
mhm.
There was more stuff involving them all stopping and talking about the ramifications of what this meant, what the doctors' lives have meant, what it meant to the people. And I think that that was all kind of cut for time, probably because they tried to make this a pretty tight hour,
Yeah, it did.
and it probably should have been an hour, hour 15.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they did,
Um,
to be honest with you, but that's the choice that was made for various reasons, whatever it was.
right.
Short attention span theater, maybe that's what they decided, like that we wouldn't be able to take a hold of it and for whatever. But
And maybe they just wanted it to be this just like totally manic feeling episode,
right,
right? Because for an hour, it's just nonstop. It just is. And it doesn't give up at any moment. But there could have been a little more of the sitting down, the talking, the seeing where it had gone, the seeing where it was going, all of that. Like, it all could have been there. But at the same time, I think we get the gist of it while leaving a lot of that out to do more with later.
Yeah,
And that's good too.
agreed, agreed. That's the best thing about I think one of the best things about Doctor Who, and one of the best things about the RTD eras and stuff is that it does drop a lot of breadcrumbs, whatever you want to call it. Like, here's some future stuff going to go on potentially somewhere down the line. I'll get there with it eventually. There's the Master stuff. There's the Toymakers Legions. There is, especially one thing I want to talk about. Who the fuck is the Toymaker afraid of?
Mhm.
And that during the card game you mentioned specifically, I saw that one and I read away. And they were
And
just like,
that's
wait,
probably the
who's
same
that?
one that, you know, our boy was talking about in the first episode. I'm gonna go tell
The
the
Master,
boss.
the boss, yeah, the boss. Oh, absolutely.
Who is Beep
Um,
talking about?
we don't know.
Who
I
is the
bet.
game? Yeah, like, and even then, like, now I have a question.
Mhm.
Was the TARDIS running away from the things on that ship? Because what if that's not what the TARDIS was running from?
That's a great point. That's a great point.
Because they were on the edge of the universe. That there's no saying that the TARDIS was actually running from those creatures on the ship.
Absolutely, 100%. They never said that. They just kind of. That's always a great classic thing of RTD. You put something in there,
Mhm.
throw it out to the world. People assume you're talking about that, but really, you're talking about something completely down the line.
Uh-huh.
Down the line. Very typical of RTD. And might not be something that gets picked up for a couple seasons. It
Yeah.
could be 3, 4
But
seasons down
it's
the road,
out there.
but it's there, and it will eventually be touched on. It might even be touched on by a later showrunner, but it's nice having those dangling threads to come to because that's how you build history. That's how you build weight. So all of a sudden, 7 years down the line, we meet the person the toy maker was scared of. You're like, oh, oh, now it all makes sense now. This whole time we've been building up to that to a degree. Now, I'm not saying it's going to take 7 years. It probably won't take 7 years to do that at all. It'll probably be in the next couple of years. But they're out there, and that's a magical thing. It's a totally magical thing, man.
No, it really is, and I think that that's why I've always liked his version of the storytelling, and I do like Moffat's too. I think Moffat tries to get a little too clever for his own good, but I like a lot of what they do because I do think that there's an era of very interesting, like, long-term play. And I mean, Davies
Yes.
is already shooting his 2nd season.
Yeah, that's the great thing about it, man. That's a phenomenal thing. That we
Yeah.
are
So,
watching this. The first season is already ready to go out there, just waiting to drop in March or whatever it is next March, April. I don't know, something
May.
next season. May is it May? Okay,
Yeah.
and they're already filming season 2. That's, I mean, hell, at this rate, we're gonna see they're gonna be shooting Shooty's regeneration for maybe before the end of season 1. We don't even know about it yet. We have no idea what's
Yeah,
going on.
right?
But that's a great thing too. That's a kind of a cool thing. Imagine not knowing who the next doctor is going to be, and they just like film it and like it just they've always been like about drumming up ratings, drumming things like, oh, let's build
Yeah.
up. We're gonna meet Peter Capaldi. We're gonna meet, Jodie Whittaker. We're gonna imagine having no idea what we're gonna get. All of a sudden, like,
Well, because people have been clamoring that for a long time.
yeah,
That was the excitement of, uh, pre-knowing Matt Smith was cast. When the Christmas special was announced as the next Doctor, everyone really believed for half a second David Morrissey might have been the next Doctor, and we just didn't
right,
realize it.
right, yeah, exactly.
And so, I would love if Davies was finally the one who pulled off, without us knowing it, that, hey, a new Doctor was cast, and it just kind of happens. Could you
Yeah,
imagine watching it? Because he almost did that at the end of The Stolen Earth.
uh-huh. You really did.
And remember us all losing our minds?
Yes, 100%. I remember losing your mind on that. So, wow. Yeah. All right. So, anything more about Neil Patrick Harris's roles? Anything more we need to talk about that?
Um,
Really, maybe here.
I just wanna say, I really think that this was the best case scenario of stunt casting. And I
Mhm.
don't mean that in a, like, mean way of stunt casting. I mean that Russell had worked with him. He knew he was a big enough name because
Right.
they had worked together before Doctor Who. He
Right.
knew NPH was the kind of guy that if you're going to bring the toy maker back, you could have some fun with it. You could do something different. Um, I really really like his performance because I
Yeah.
think that it's the right air of letting him do his own thing without feeling hindered by what came before.
I also agree, and I want to throw out there something I said about Shooty earlier, but also is very apt for NPH as well. As the villain of the story, you need someone to bring the energy to match David Tennant. If you have a flat villain who isn't matching the energy of David Tennant, it doesn't come across as scary enough or as threatening enough or as meaningful enough as a villain. NPH can step up to David Tennant with energy and match him beat for beat, moment for moment, and like really not lose a step. That's why he's so horrifying because he can compete with David Tennant, and that's why little things happen. I go back to it a million times. My favorite line of the whole film, I think my favorite line of the whole show was him saying over and over again, "Well, that's all right then," like because it
Hmm.
just became more and more like, damn.
Real quick. So I just got to the moment in the episode again with the regeneration, and I want to point out something
Mhm.
that I'm really just catching
Okay.
that I find very interesting. I
Okay.
kind of said it earlier. I brought up the Shooty saying, "No, I'm me,"
Yeah.
but I'm realizing also that moment is not just him being like, "Hey, I'm who I am."
Mhm.
There's a legit excitement to him realizing in that moment that he is finally him. So that must again, this is him realizing in that moment during the bi generation, he's finally come full circle to the moment where 14 lets go.
Yeah. Yeah. I almost
That's
feel
so
like
interesting.
what I took from it, and I still take it, I just hit that moment myself as well. It feels like he's looking at it like when he splits off, he sees 14 and he just remembers who he was at that
Yeah.
time in his life. And he's like, I'm me now. I am not you. I am the rehabbed you. I'm at a
Yes,
totally
exactly.
different
That's what I
place for
mean.
you. Yeah.
It's crazy. Like it's such a 4D chess sort of thing.
Yep.
And I
100%.
love that.
100%.
Oh god, it's so
Yeah.
good.
So good.
No, but I also want to say I think that one thing I find fascinating is they were very open about NPH not being a Doctor Who fan coming in. He had never
Yeah.
watched it really or knowing anything, and I actually think ultimately maybe that was better. Because not to say that there's not look, we've had great doctors who were huge fans. David Tennant, Peter
Peter
Capaldi,
Capaldi. Yeah.
Matt Smith was kind of a fan, but not like a deep trenched fan. Sometimes it's okay to bring people in who really don't know and let them take their own crack and put their own spin on a character without the baggage. And I
Mhm.
think that that's a really great thing.
I
Because, like,
agree.
look, I love Catherine Tate.
Mhm.
Do you think she actually, like, you watch most of her interviews? I don't think she understands half the stuff that happens in the show.
No. God, no. I don't think so
And
at
I
all.
don't mean that as a dig. It's
No.
just like you see Tennant having to remind her of things. And I don't
Yeah.
think that's like a cheeky, fun play. That is the truth.
Right, and that's okay. That's perfectly okay. You
Right,
don't
it's
have to
totally
love it.
fine, and it's
You're doing a
totally
job.
okay,
When they
but
do
it
love it, we empathize with them a little bit more. We're like, "Oh, he's one of us." We get it's one of us up there in the role. David Tennant's one of us. Peter Capaldi is one of us. But they're actors, so they're just as long as they're effective telling their story, it doesn't matter if they like it or not. Um, what I find interesting also is that it's an American actor in the role, which I know is kind of touchy at times, having an American in the role. Last time I really could think about it in that kind of fashion was what Billy Zane from the movie, maybe,
yeah,
or not Billy Zane. I'm sorry, Eric Roberts from the movie. I don't know why I said
yeah,
Billy Zane, but
because we all like Billy Zane and things.
we do, we are Billy Zane stands. Um, the cynical side of me says, well, yeah, got the big Disney Plus thing, and so we want an like the American thing will help sell the Disney Plus era. But I honestly think that Russell T Davies picks the best person for the role, and it just happens to be an American this time through. And PH was very successful with it. So at the end of the day, that's the most important thing.
Mhm. It's a great performance,
Yeah.
and I'm really glad that the toy maker is back, and this is clearly not the last time we're gonna see the toy maker.
Right.
I mean, let's just call it what it is. You don't just use NPH once and never use him again.
Right.
That's just not how this is gonna work. He will be back,
Especially
with his
especially with his
legions.
legions coming.
Correct.
So that's
So,
gotta be
I
smart.
love that.
Mhm.
And I genuinely wouldn't be shocked if it turns out later down the line that we do meet a toy maker who wins another game against the
Mm.
doctor.
Wouldn't be surprised at all. Wouldn't be surprised at all. And maybe even a doctor master toy maker.
Mhm.
Toy master has met the master. We know that now at this point. Um,
There dude,
yeah.
that moment when the toy maker goes, "I played a game against the master and he became my tooth," and, like, he does the gold grin, and you see it, and Shooty just that moment where you realize that the doctor still remembers the Missy
Right.
master, and
Right.
realizing how far that character had come, and that, like, just disgusted, like, tongue click that he does, and you just know at that point that NPH's toy maker had gone too far for
Yeah.
Shooty,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know? Oh my god. Oh, it's such a and again, how good is Shooty in that moment?
Beautiful. Yeah, he really is. He just is energetic. He has it spot on. He knows his character. He knows his character very well. And I'm not someone who knows Shooty Gala from anything. I never watched Sex Education. I never watched anything with him in it really, except for Barbie. I think is Barbie. That's about it. That's all I really know him from. But he's spot on. Just seems to have this innate understanding of the character, innate understanding of what he's supposed to be doing. And it's a brilliant thing. Another thing I wanted to throw out there, kind of sidetrack a little bit, is actually bringing something back. You mentioned the meta crisis of it all, and how there's a little bit of repetitiveness to it potentially. Not necessarily repetitiveness, but like there is some kind of throat callback in there. I want to say that I think that's exactly. I think it actually was partially done specifically for that because this is where it is a 60th anniversary. There are callbacks to be had. There are kind of nods, winks and nods, and I think the meta crisis of it all was part of it. And you know what? I'm talking myself into it. Maybe the Rasputin thing was the nod to the Jodie era in a way. Like that was because
Right.
that was, I think the Rasputin thing was probably the most RTD thing in the 13th Doctor era. To be honest with you, kind of felt like the most RTD type
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely. I won't argue with that at all.
So that, and let's be here's another thing. The master, like again, we had this conversation off air. Like I think the master could have been in there as just a way to give it some oomph, some like here's a 6th anniversary. The master is probably outside the Daleks, probably the most important villain. And the Daleks aren't a single character. The Daleks are a race. The master is probably the most individual villain the Doctor's ever faced. You can't
Yeah.
have a 60th anniversary without having something in there. So you get him in there a little bit just by doing this. But the end, the way the female picks up the tooth, it's absolutely meant to be a callback and a reminiscence of when the ring,
At the
John
end of season
Sims's
3.
at the end of season 3, they pick up the ring and there's the laughter and everything else. It's like a complete, almost copy of that moment, but you can get away with that in the 60s as like this is a callback to that, and that's what works
And
about it.
again, because this feels like a big finale, it's, like, cool that they're doing it because it'll also feel like next year or whenever the master finally appears again, it'll have been kinda set up, but you didn't have to see it, while also it was set up if you didn't see it. Like,
Right.
I loved that, and I love that this episode I'll say these last 3 episodes, in fact,
Yeah.
felt like the good version of Die Another Day, where
Mm,
you jam-packed it with 60 years worth of lore and
right.
nods and callbacks and things, but it never felt like it wasn't earned,
Right.
and it all felt like it landed the right way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, let's take a moment to talk about Unit, um, and Unit's incarnation here,
Kate
what it's doing.
Lethbridge Stewart.
We almost, I always thought, I think we all thought that she was going to slap him for some reason when she first comes out.
I mean,
Like,
dude,
that mean face on,
honestly,
that mad face.
between that and honestly, the moment when she 100% goes evil,
Yes.
she's the scariest thing in that episode. In an
Yeah.
episode featuring NPH's insane take on the toy
Yeah.
maker.
Yes. Absolutely. I love it. I love that we're getting Unit for what it is. I love Avengers Tower Unit because it feels like this is a big budget explosion, so to speak. We're building
Yeah.
this out to be a universe. Having unit be that powerful is important, I think. I will say
Well,
one
and
drawback.
even the
One
doctor
drawback.
says it.
Right.
Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, you
Them being
mentioned.
like,
Go ahead.
"Hey,
Yeah.
you guys used to hide in the shadows, basically.
Right.
Now look at you." Like,
Right out
I
there.
loved that because it's
Yeah.
like they're out there and people need to know.
Right. The one I think I don't know if missed opportunity is the right word. I know we have Shirley there, and I like Shirley as a character and everything else. I kind of miss Osgood and Oswin. I
I missed
kind of wanted
Osgood too.
I wanted to see it. It would have been nice to have her there as a
You know
continuing
what?
point.
Osgood, Martha, Ace, and Malcolm. Where is Malcolm? Justice for Malcolm.
Justice for Malcolm. Good point. Good point.
Um, and that's that. I'm sure that there will be more of Unit in the future. Obviously, there's been a lot of set pictures involving a lot of those characters for the next couple of seasons, which is great and wonderful.
Right.
But I would like to see more. And I like that it's very clear now that anytime we're gonna run into like old companions and things like that, it'll be very clearly unit based with
Right.
the inclusion of Mel in this, with
I
Donna.
love I love that, to be honest with
Me
you.
too.
Gives you a central hub to come back to when you need to. And it makes things
Yes.
so much easier. Instead of randomly coming about, you randomly meet people, these companions. You have a reason to meet these companions. They have a reason to go look for you, for example, or for whatever. It was so good. I love that idea. 60,000, no, 120,000 plus 5 weeks holiday. Done. All
Mhm.
right, good. There we go. There we go.
I love it. I think it's fantastic. And once again, I mean, a part of it for me is I think that he looked at School Reunion as like you can get away with it once, but you can't keep going back to the doctor just running into companions.
Right,
But Unit can use certain companions for certain things if things are happening, right? Because certain companions will have gone against certain monsters or
right.
whatever the situation is. So now there's a reason to bring back specific people if you just want to tell a story
Yep,
involving certain characters. And I
100%.
love that. I think it's great. And but I do think you're right. I think that the lack of Osgood was kind of a bummer.
Yeah,
Um, Especially considering like the 60th Big Finish stories made it a point to have Osgood
right.
involved. Um, Especially with her being such like an uber fan of Doctor Who,
It
right?
makes sense to have her in there. Yeah, that's the thing, because she's like our entry
She's our
point
eye.
into it. She's our eyes, exactly. We would be in unit being there if we were in this universe, so to speak. Absolutely.
Right.
So
So that was kind of a weird thing. And again, like we haven't seen Malcolm. We know Martha could have been there. We know that Ace could have been there. Just little things. But overall, it's not a detriment. It's just a note.
right. I mean, obviously, we also had Ace and Tegan during Power of the Doctor. They had their episode recently, so it almost would have felt probably too much like a retread to have them there again. Although, same time, they are part of Unit. But I understand why you want to have them like a Mel in there this time. Throw some love a different way, in a way that you can tell help celebrate 60 years without having done something you just did. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of potential moving forward. That's for sure. That is for sure.
I
Um,
mean, I want now for the show to be able to play with that. And
yeah.
I also want Russell T Davies to be able to play with that. I think that's really important, actually.
Mhm. I
Um,
agree.
Again, I know that we're closing the door on 60 years worth of trauma and things like that. And there's a doctor now who has a family who should be living that life. And that's
Mhm.
great and that's wonderful. And is that it's as it should be. But that also doesn't change the fact that you should be able to go back to unit and when monsters appear and certain things are happening because again I do think that there's a world where Russell T Davies knows that Torchwood is just never coming back that unfortunately ha- because of the face of Torchwood
Yes.
there's a good chance that Torchwood cannot ever come back at least
Right.
as it was and unit
Potentially
is the
correct.
pivot to do something with that.
Yeah, no, well, here's the thing also, like, we've mentioned before, I mean, Russell T Davies has been pretty adamant about wanting to Marvelize, if you will, Doctor Who. Um, Although that was something he said a while ago, and has a chance to do it, to build out, have spinoffs. I mean, he did it before with Torchwood, with Sarah Jane Adventures, et cetera, et cetera. But expansion of the universe, any expansion of the universe almost necessitates a non-doctor story or a
Correct.
non-doctor crew, because if you have a spin-off that includes a doctor, it is just Doctor Who, just done differently. Hell, the third Doctor's whole thing was being Earthbound at Unit. That like, so if you had a David Tennant Unit spin-off, that's basically just another Doctor Who story. Having With that being said, creating the unit the way they did, now you have the hub for any spin-off to really spin off of. You could have a Torchwood type whatever. You could have a companion support group type anthology, and they could all be hubbed around the unit. Could be like that buffer between the actual Doctor stories and all the spin-offs. And I think it's done in a very good way. I think that sets up things perfectly.
Well, and that's what it needs to be, right? Once
Right.
again, like we talk about this all the time. Sorry, I had a clip that played while I was trying to look up a picture real quick. But there's something to be said about your point. You can't have a spinoff of Doctor Who that involves the Doctor all the time. Otherwise, you are just a Doctor Who spinoff. But to have that central hub that allows you to potentially have the character show up, but involve a lot of other characters within it,
Hmm.
suddenly that's interesting.
Yeah,
And suddenly you can
absolutely.
do other things. And I think that Torchwood was the best version of that in a lot of ways, but it never fully found its footing until Children of Earth. But even then, like it wasn't necessarily fully realized.
Right.
Um, I think a unit show is the best case scenario
Torchwood
where
was
it
the
can be
mature
every
Doctor Who, was the more mature
correct.
Doctor Who, a lot of more violent sex type. It was like a little more of adult. Whereas Sarah Jane Adventures was the skewing the opposite direction, was skewing towards the younger generation, even further younger than Doctor Who was. But I think they all had the same basis of expanding the universe out in a good way. And it should go that way. I think we might get something similar that way. We could get a darker side to Doctor Who potentially. We could get a lighter fare in Doctor Who. Both are absolutely I don't say necessary, but they're absolutely available, and I think I think it's a good thing to have both those avenues to explore, especially with unit
Absolutely.
as a basis. And so many things you can do with unit too. There's just so many avenues you can go down. Um, and it's not to say that the doctor can't appear, or
Right. Like I
that
said, it leaves the door
a
open, right?
doctor a doctor couldn't appear. You could have Paul
Especially
McGann show
doctors
up.
inside of memory TARDIS.
That's what I'm saying. We could have these doctors appear, give them some more moments in the sun where you can have like it almost feels like a Doctor Who episode, but it's part of unit. And I think that works. I think that just works. All of a sudden, you know, Davison shows up, the fifth Doctor shows up there in the future. It's a wonderful possibility to see.
I love the
And
idea of unit being able to put out, like, say, some sort of distress call, right?
mhm,
And they're hoping any doctor will answer the call and they don't know who, and like McGann walks in the door.
right.
I'm the
That's the
I'm the
fun thing
doctor,
about unit.
but maybe not the one you were expecting.
Right, exactly. That's the funny part too, because this is where it comes back down to what I talked about before: our timeline versus their timeline. Our timeline, we see that we expect the current doctor to show up. The shoot he got was going to show up because he's our current doctor, or this time it's got to be David Tennant because David Tennant's our current doctor at the time. But in the unit show, and in reality, with the reality they're presenting in their
Mhm.
reality, any doctor can show up at any time because he's a freaking time traveler into time and space. He could have the first doctor. You could have a David Bradley show up
Yeah, I was
as the
gonna say
first
David
doctor.
Bradley could absolutely walk in the door.
And like there it is. Like that's exactly there's always the unending possibilities, and that's phenomenal. That is phenomenal to me. I think it'd be funny, to be completely honest. You could have an unknown actor pop in and say, "Yes, I'm a doctor," and it ends up being like the 50th doctor, like somewhere like way down the line. You could have something
Yeah.
like that happen. Now that would be kind of strange, and maybe that would break some things potentially, but I think it'd be a fun thing to explore.
You could
Imagine
also
having
even
like
play
us.
with, alternate timelines. The unbound doctors exist.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Could
Yeah,
you
so
imagine
there's
I mean, again, I
potential.
it bums me out that David Warner's passed away because imagine David Warner wandering onto the the show.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of different things you could do. 100 million things you could do. Um, yeah,
I mean, dude, look, I don't. There's so much I can and want to continue saying about this show because, God, the things that they did in 60 minutes of this episode, it really just reaffirmed how much I love Doctor Who and what it
yeah,
can be and all the like the endless possibilities of the show. And now we have this world where Shooty gets to be the best version of the character. It's a fresh restart.
yeah.
That's amazing.
That
This guy is
is
gonna get to run in the TARDIS, making it his role. That rules.
yes. It does rule. It does rule. I still, it's hard for me to even get over it. Where they're filming season 2 already. That just blows my mind. Because the best part about that is we're not going to get the same old breaks,
Right. No.
the same old breaks we had forever. Like where it was like a year or 2 years sometimes in between episodes. Like what? Now we're not going to have that, and that's why the spinoffs are just as important too. Because we're going to get a season of Shooty Gatwa's Doctor, the first season in May, as you say.
Yep.
November, we could see a Paul McGann special. We could see December a unit spinoff start. So even less time in between returning to that universe. You might not get the Doctor back for another year, but you get like other entry points in there. And that's just phenomenal to me. I love the fact that we're expanding out. 60 years later, we are finally expanding out to some of the potential we could get from this show, these series.
And they attempted it. Again, like, there's not
And yeah,
people forget, Russell T Davies tried. We talked about Torchwood, we talked about the fact
Sarah
that
Jane
Sarah Jane
Adventures. And,
Adventures, then there was Class during the Moffat era.
mhm,
Like, there
mhm.
have been attempts to continue forward, but it's never really fully taken off, but with the power of a company like Disney helping you globally, now you have the potential of actually creating spinoffs that last,
Yeah,
and the universe can continue forward in that way, and that's awesome.
100%. I love it. What a great 60th anniversary. What a great moment in time. What a great rebirth of the show. May can't come soon enough, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know, man. Do you have anything else you wanted to put forth about the episode before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I mean, I we should bring it up, just because we really haven't. We've talked about how incredible that Catherine Tate has been through the entire return, but she was really, really magnificent in this. I kind of
Mm,
touched on it that moment when she was like, "Well, maybe this is where I save you," is one of many great moments she has. But the very end of the episode, and you kind of brought it up, was when she goes, "How are you?" Like, and he says, "This is the happiest I've ever been," and you see it, and there's that moment of him telling Rose that she is his favorite niece, and he's
oh,
there to
yeah.
look after her for the first, and Mel shows up, and
Not any Mel.
all of that. It just really once again reaffirms. I think people are really looking at it wrong. Him staying there with a group of people who are now away from it, and Wilf is still out there shooting at moles that are wearing what was it?
Force fields,
Little
whatever it's
barrier force fields that the doctor gave them because he loves the moles.
Let me tell you,
This
that specifically was perfect because, quite frankly, that is exactly what Pierre Capaldi says. Even though, rest in peace, Bernard Cribbins died. What a wonderful way he went out, and like we don't have to have Wolf die. We don't have to have Wolf
yeah,
die just because the actor passed. Unfortunately, it's a difference between the actor and the character. Now that character is living open ended, immortal for the rest of time because we don't have to have that death on
shooting
screen.
moles.
He's just there shooting moles, having a grand old time with the crew and with the doctor and with everyone. It's a positively positive send off that should be allowed in fiction. This is
Yes,
fiction, people. This is allowed. We're allowed to have this kind of thing. We
fictional
don't have to have fictional
characters.
characters, as Ben Affleck says. Yes, and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, which is a great movie. But I love that. I love having that positivity in there.
I do too. It's just good, and Tate was great, and I'm happy that the door is closed on a version of the show that I loved, allowing a brand new version of the show to exist in a way that I don't think it's ever gotten the chance to. Like 2005 was an attempt at it, and
Mhm.
it worked for a while until it itself got bogged down in its own
Right.
history and its own everything. And I think
Right.
that Davies has now put it on the right path to do something new and exciting and different.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. Absolutely. God, I love it. I love Doctor Who. And I'm so happy we got this. This is something we've been waiting for a long time, ever since it was announced. What, like, when was it out? Like 2 years ago? Was it announced? I don't remember when it
Almost,
was.
just about to it was like a year and 8 months or something.
And we've been waiting.
Yeah.
I want to say patiently, but it hasn't been patiently
No, it's not been
for this
patient at all.
forever. And here it is, and it hit just about every point we needed to hit, and we are ready to work and ready to go on. And May's going to be here before you know it.
I'm so excited, but we got one more episode before that, which is the Christmas special in 2 weeks, which I am
Right?
absurdly excited about. There's dance numbers and musical bits and a bunch of little cute looking goblin things, and I am so hyped.
Yeah, me too. Destination Christmas for sure. I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see what it's going to do. It's going to introduce Rose, or not Rose, Ruby Rose, I
Ruby
should
Road.
say that it is. Ruby Road. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll be back here to talk about that again. We're going to be, this is like an announcement of this show specifically. I will talk about this off air, I think, a little more, but like, this is going to be an after show, as it were. This is not going to be a every week kind of show. We're going to do Big Blue
No.
Box because we just unfortunately don't have time. And there's a part of me that wishes that we could have time to do a weekly podcast of Doctor Who. We could always find ways to do
If
things.
we could do a weekly podcast always, we would, but there's a reason we don't. We
That's
just
right.
don't
There's a
have the
reason
time.
why we pushed Two Mediocre White Dudes on Film to bi-weekly instead of weekly. However, with that being said, like I said, we're doing after shows for this one. We're going to do another one for Christmas. We're going to probably, unfortunately, do this due to the season, due to the holiday. We'll probably end up pushing back that review till like the weekend after, maybe that Saturday or Sunday, whatever. Um, but I will say, I don't think it'll be until May that we come back. I think we will probably have a few one-offs, if you will. In fact, I was going to pitch this to you. I'll pitch it to you on air right now, or record it right now. I think maybe sometimes in between franchises of Two Mediocre White Dudes, we could take a Two Mediocre White Dude on film off. Like, we'll finish the Jason run. We'll do John Wick for Kelly for our Patreon because he asked for it like about a year and a half ago now. But then, like in between franchises, we could do an episode or two of the Big Blue Box where we kind of just have some fun moments and fun times, and then come back. I don't know. That's
I like this.
like
You're a
that.
smart man.
Yeah, we
You're a
take a little
smart
time off
man.
to be here for White News. We do some Big Blue Box. We're good. And of course, when the season comes back for 8, 10, whatever, how many episodes there are, we'll do after shows on that. We'll figure out that schedule as we get closer to it. But I'm just glad to talk Doctor Who with you, man. Just glad to talk Doctor Who.
You and me both, man. It makes
So,
me happy. Makes me happy that you're happy that we're happy doing it together. And
yes,
Doctor Who is back. Like that's it. That's how it is. And I'm happy that we are living in a world where it's this good again.
absolutely. All right, let's where can the folks find you then, PJ?
You guys can find me on Twitter, Instagram, all the fun places at PJ Campbell. I'm on pretty much every one of those like social media platforms. If you're on there, I'm trying to attempt to use some of the other ones more because X looks like it's continuing to implode more and more. Formerly Twitter. I don't know what to call it anymore. It's a shit show over there, but we're around, and then you can find me here talking movies and stuff with this gentleman right here.
Absolutely. At Paul Denizio on the old Twitter, X, whatever. On PLD Projects on Threads and I think Paul Denizio on Blue Sky. Again, I'm trying to use those more too, but I'm failing miserably. I'm hoping that they expand out and people jump over there. Then I'll feel more like I'm ready to jump over there. It kind of feels like when I talk to people, I have to go back to Twitter so far at this point. I don't want to have to, but that's the way it is at this point. But yeah, you can find me here all over the channel. If this is your first time here, hit that like and subscribe, hit that bell. Let us know what you think about this, whether you want to see more from the Big Blue Box or what you'd want to see more from the Big Blue Box. While you're here, you should also check out some other shows, like with the aforementioned Two Mediocre White Dudes on Film. We'll finally on Tuesday night or Tuesday afternoon, going to finally record our episode on Jason Takes a Cruise. Jason Takes Manhattan. And we'll get into the rest of the Friday the 13th saga as we move forward. And as you heard, we'll be doing John Wick after that, the 4 John Wick episodes, installments, I should say. But a lot of other stuff as well. I do Holy Snokes with Matt and Gunner doing Star Wars every week. I do a show on my favorite sci-fi TV franchise of the 80s. And then I also do Holy Snokes. I do Crown Jewels on my sister YouTube channel, BLD Project. Crown Jewels, A Journey Through Queen. But yeah, that's everything here, guys. So until next time, again, right after the Christmas special, we'll be around not too long after that to break down that and look forward to the future. But yeah, that's then. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will see you at that time.
Bye bye.